Welcome to Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. You are going to hear the stories from the eclectic life of a guy who is a professional counselor, a family man, a SWAT team chaplain, outdoor enthusiast, a guy involved with ropes, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, a chaotic Jedi, and who is a recipient of an honorary doctorate from the University of Adversity. Using these stories, we take the facts lead to concepts, and from the concepts we make a variety of life applications. Just a caveat about the facts. Most of the time we will tell you the facts just the way it happened, but once in a while we'll give you the facts the way other people remember how it happened, and that usually includes a tablespoon of embellishment. No harm is meant, just good, clean fun for educational purposes. Please subscribe and share this with your friends or your enemies. It might help them to be better people if they listen. As always, we thank you for keeping up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Introducing the Bible degree with digital ministry. Paul used the marketplace and the synagogue to reach an expanded audience. We have access to the internet and social media. I once heard it said that when McDonald's introduced the drive-through window, they did not change the Big Mac, only how it was delivered. Faulkner University is now offering a new digital ministry track for their Bible degree. Faulkner's degree provides training in understanding and teaching the gospel, alongside training that will allow students to create quality digital content. Opportunities for evangelism in the digital spaces is unlimited, and this is innovative ministry education for our contemporary culture. One of the instructors is a 2-time Emmy-winning former ESPN designer. Members of the Church of Christ could be eligible for the full tuition Jack Zorn Scholarship in order to pursue this special area of study. For more information, contact admissions at faulkner.edu. That is admissions at faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a digital partner with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. In the third installment of things I've learned from dumb stuff on ropes, and I recognize I've been on a streak. The first story I told reminded me of the second story, and the second story reminded me of the third story. And so I'm telling about some repelling adventures, and I promise we'll take a break from rope stuff in the next episode. But just outside of Pangburn, Arkansas, there's this large quarry, and it's called Libby Rock. My brother-in-law, Shane Wallace, found it on his way back from Heber Springs, and he found it back in the day. And I saw it. We drove out there to look at it, and I estimated it to be about a 300-foot rappel. And I decided it was something I had to do. I was young and had been rappelling a lot, but I'd never seen anything this big. I'd never been out west. I hadn't seen the Rockies. I hadn't been to Yosemite yet. I'd looked down into a pretty intimidating pit a time or two, 170 foot, maybe a 200-foot natural well, but I'd never seen anything above ground that was this tall. And having a limited budget, being a youth minister, I couldn't just go out and buy a 300-foot rope, but I had 2 ropes. Actually, I had 3 at the time, and I decided that I could make this rappel by attaching 2 ropes tied together. And this involved a bit of research. This was before the internet, so by research, I mean going to the library and looking at books and a lot of trial and error. Many, many trials, many, many errors, some discovery, and even in the middle of the actual event itself, I made a discovery. Turns out that by the time you use the anchor point as close as you can get to the edge that's still stable, you have a little bit of an approach. The amount of rope you needed to rappel the tall side of Libby was 295 feet. You had just a little bit of rope coil on the bottom. Now, this rock formation is a perfect inside corner. The right side of the corner is the 300-foot face, and the left side of that little angle is only about 120 foot, really steep walking up. So in order to do this rappel, in order to attach two ropes together that will go through a figure eight, you must use a double fisherman's bend. That's not to be confused with the European death knot for obvious reasons. And then learning how to pass that knot through your rappel device. This is when I made the switch from using a standard figure eight descender to using an eared or a rescue figure eight. And the first one I bought came from Blue Water. Now, there's a real interesting thing, and I discovered this in situ on longer rappels, and I should have thought of this. I should have known this. Nobody writing about it in those days. On longer rappels, the weight of the rope acts like a belayer. And as you descend, there's less rope below you. Thus, there's less weight below you, and the resistance begins to go away as you increase your speed, and you can accelerate exponentially. Lucky for me, there was a knot 150 feet from the top and 150 feet from the bottom, and it brought me to a bouncing halt. Otherwise, I might have had a deceleration trauma. Some would say this is probably where I earned the first Wile E. Coyote patch. I'll let the judges decide that. After coming to a stop at the knot and negotiating that knot through my rappel device, I rappelled the other 150 feet and got to the ground, and there was no problems without incident other than a little close call on the hike out. We would return to Libby and drop the short side. It was a really fun wall to rappel on, easy to get to, easy to rig. And we'd go over there, probably a half a dozen times on our various trips back to Arkansas to meet with Jackie's family for Christmas and different things. But eventually Libby would become a thing of our past. No trespassing signs would spring from the ground, and it would fade into the annals of rappelling obscurity. But on the occasion that I'm talking about, we were there, and by we, I mean the smoking hot wife, my brother-in-law Shane, and his girlfriend at the time. The girlfriend at the time was a very pleasant enough young lady, and she occupies a firm spot in the top 10 most difficult people to get to rappel. We didn't have to talk her into it. She was willing. We just had to talk her through it. She had long, beautiful, gorgeous red hair. So we're here on top of this rock, and I rappelled first because I'm going to run the safety operations from the bottom. Shane had rappelled, and then Jackie had supervised the attachment of Carol's rappel device into the rope and was coaching her over the edge. Now, the rope's job is to hold you. You put your hand on the rope and you use the rope to control your movement, but you don't hold yourself up because of your own strength. You don't hold your own weight by holding the rope. The only way to learn that this thing works is to lean back against the rope. And that's the only way to realize, hey, the rope has you, the rope is holding you up. The most difficult part of rappelling is the transition from the horizontal plane standing on top of the rock to the vertical plane standing on the side of the rock. It's the most difficult, the most challenging aspect of rappelling. And this young lady would almost break the plane. She'd start to lean back almost perfectly, and then she would collapse forward onto the horizontal plane, onto our launching point. And she did this multiple times. She would even get her feet over the edge, but instead of having her feet flat on the rock and her heels pointed down and her toes pointed up, she'd have her toes pointed into the rock on some little ledge. And then about the time she would feel that pressure backward, she'd fall forward. I should have anticipated the unfolding drama. I've heard that you only come to the planet, you're only born with two fears: loud noises and falling backwards. Jordan Peterson says we're born afraid of everything and we learn to be brave. I really respect Jordan, and I'll have to look into this. But at the time, I'm operating on the assumption that you're only afraid of two things: loud noises and falling backwards. And so her reluctance to lean back and let the rope do its job is pretty normal, but a lot of people can overcome that once they realize, hey, this rope's going to hold me. But her reluctance to lean back and the repeated, the cyclical, I'm going to start to lean, I'm going to fall, I'm going to start to lean, I'm going to fall. It should have telegraphed, it should have predicted, it should have warned, foreshadowed, prognosticated, or prophesied what was in store for us. Don't ever take people rappelling if you're under a time crunch. You don't want to be rushing against a storm front. You don't want to be rushing darkness. You don't want to be operating against the wall of any kind of a difficult circumstances. This was near Christmas. It's going to get dark real early. And as the sun began to set, the shadows started creeping toward us. And as the shadows would go over the little puddles of water, the water was freezing. It was already cold. And it's going to get dark and it's going to get colder. And not too far down the rock, not too far down the rock face, Carol is sliding down the rope and she's hearing a lot of, hey, you got to lean back more. Don't look down between your feet. Look down over your shoulder. You got to lean back more. Look up. Don't look down. Right in the middle of this thing, she just stopped. Now, I'm giving her coaching from the bottom, and because there's distance between us, it could have been interpreted that I was yelling at her, but I was just speaking loud enough to be heard. But I finally said, hey, come on down. You got to go. And she said, I can't. This thingy is caught in my hair. Well, actually, her hair was caught in the thingy, but I was in no mood to debate the semantics. I yelled at Jackie to start lowering the second or the rescue rope. I gave the belay rope to Shane, and I started sprinting and scrambling up the steep slope that we used to walk to the top. I got to the top, and I looked at Jackie as I reached and pulled from the elastic bungee cords on the side of my backpack a Pack Meyer grip rubber-coated handle frost cutlery Bowie knife. I shoved it down the back of my shirt. I locked into my figure eight, locked it onto my line, gave Jackie a quick kiss. I heard the theme from Star Wars, and then her blue eyes locked with mine. You will not cut that hair. We'll see. And I heard the laugh that Christopher Lambert does in the movie Highlander, and I bounced over the edge. I don't like having exposed blades around ropes that are under tension. A rope under tension exposed to a blade will sever. That's why we pad the edges of the rocks, just so we don't get rock cut on the ropes. That rope will sever quickly and dynamically and explosively, and then that's good in a rescue scenario. I was in a training scenario where you rappel down to a person who's entangled, you clip them to your harness, and you cut their rope away. And I actually cut their rope away intentionally by using my boot string and sawing it back and forth and creating friction. So I got down beside this stranded rappeller. I locked off my descent using a leg wrap, and I reached for that buoy. And as I reached for the handle of that Bowie knife over my back, I heard my wife's voice. You will not cut that hair. Now, I could do this another way, but it's going to be time consuming. It's going to be a little bit involved. I'm going to have to tie some knots. It's going to be inconvenient. And after all, it's not my fault that she's here. It's not my fault that we're in a time crunch. And it's going to be dark, and I wasn't operating with flashlights. I didn't have headlamps at the time. The best thing to do is cut her hair and just go. I mean, hair grows back. And you just think, if I could have been prescient and seen into the future, how cool would it have been to have a podcast episode entitled, I Scalped a Redhead While Rappelling. But all those options for cutting that hair would have made things easier for me. I opted to stay married and let Shane decide what he would do to continue to date this girl in the future or not. I unslung a piece of webbing. That sounds so Spider-Man, but it's actually just a flat tubular strap. I fashioned a frost knot and hung this thing above her head using a hand ascender. And instead of asking her to do a pull-up on the hand ascender like I had asked Lisa, I just simply asked her, hey, put your foot in that loop and stand up. And she did. And when she did, it relieved the tension, and we were able to pull her hair out of the figure eight. We kept a little hair in the figure eight, but nothing like I was intending to do with that Bowie knife. It's nothing that a little shampoo and fluff wouldn't hide. No bare scalp, and everyone kept their clothes on. As I think back about this, I'm reminded of an article that a guy named John Smith wrote years ago. He wrote it in a church bulletin. John was a minister in the Montgomery, Alabama area, and my brother worked with him. And he wrote the book, My Mother Played the Piano. It's a collection of heartwarming stories about his childhood. But what I remember is that John wrote this article entitled The Trimming of Spot's Tail. Now, Spot was this solid black dog that had no spots at all, but they named him Spot because he was just that. He was one big black spot. He had a legendary tail that was in everybody else's way. It was in everybody's way but his. It knocked things around. It knocked things over. It knocked things off of things. And it became such a nuisance that John's dad, apparently not a pianist, decided he was going to cut several inches of the tail off with a hatchet. Upon seizing the poor dog and securing his tail with a belt, he began to take careful aim, pulling the tail and the belt together, and took careful aim with his hand axe. He was being questioned by the owner of poor Spot, John being the only advocate for the dog's well-being and from the dog's perspective, and his dad assured him, "Don't worry, dogs don't have feelings in their tails." Spot, being prescient, decided to move at about the moment Mr. Smith's axe swung into the air. I don't really remember how the story ends. I think it involves John's dad losing some of his belt and Spot keeping most of his tail. I do remember that Spot's relationship with the elder Smith was altered, and he eyed him, if not suspiciously, but cautiously the rest of his mortal days. We did a similar skit several years ago. And it's based on the idea where Jesus says, why do you look at a speck of sawdust in your brother's eye when you've got a beam or a large piece of wood sticking out of your own eye? We have this Dr. Eyebeam, and he's got this large prop sticking out of his eye, and he comes in with a pair of tweezers, and he's going to remove this little bitty thing from another person's eye. The whole theme about the thing is about judging. And he looks at this guy, and he's the guy who has the sawdust is reluctant, and he's terrified, and he's panicked. And the doctor with the beam sticking out of his eye says, "Don't be afraid. This won't hurt me much. I'm doing this so I'll feel better." How is it that we are so ready to modify other people for our benefit? Now, sure, there are things about other people that I don't like. There are things about me that other people don't like, but do they need to be changed? Cutting Carol's hair was going to be in her best interest. I mean, after all, I'm rescuing her. I'm saving her from something she did that I asked her not to do repeatedly. Stop leaning forward. She ignored the advice I gave her. You need to lean backwards. I'm doing this for her. But you don't cut somebody's long red hair with a Bowie knife unless it's a last resort. Oh, now it would have been much easier for me to give a Bowie knife haircut. It would have been faster, more efficient. It wouldn't have been much effort on my part. But what would it have done to her? And how would it have affected us? Oh, now she'd be grateful. My hair got tangled up in this thing, and I was, nearly 100 feet off the ground, and you came up and made sure that I didn't, spend the night up there in the freezing cold. She'd be obligated to be appreciative. But sometimes what you say and what you really feel don't always match. I'm appreciative you got me out of that mess, but you mangled my hair. I don't have any idea how long it takes to grow hair past your shoulders. Our relationship would have been altered forever. And even if you get to the point that you can laugh about it later, it still happened at and in the moment. And I did what was easy, convenient for me under the guise of I'm telling you this is what's best for you. If we were to cut away or remove or modify all the things about us that other people didn't like, didn't want, or just wanted to be different about us, would there be any of us left? Obviously, I'm not saying we never accept constructive criticism. I'm not saying we never try to change or modify things in order to improve. But what I'm trying to convey is the point that in an unhealthy relationship, in an unhealthy business relationship, personal or even in churches, we often ask people to make changes, and those requests and suggestions and demands and modifications or imputations, just making things easier for us to get along with them rather than making them better. We're making these changes, and the things that we're changing, they're not wrong, they're not immoral, they're not unhealthy, they're not dysfunctional, they're just inconvenient to us, and we want to make it easier on us. I use a graduated scale for behavior and personality traits. When I'm talking to groups about mental health or de-escalation seminars, you got somebody and they've got a unique personality trait, or they've got a behavior, or they're just eccentric. The scale goes inconvenient, uncomfortable, difficult, disruptive, or dangerous. Now, disruptive and dangerous usually have to be addressed either in an interpersonal relationship or by management or by leadership. In a personal relationship, your tolerance for dose toxicity comes into play. You got to ask yourself, what am I willing to pay in order to maintain this relationship, or what's it going to cost the company or the organization or whatever? But things that are just difficult, things that are just uncomfortable, things that are just inconvenient, those are things that bother us, but they don't affect productivity. They don't affect spirituality. They don't affect mental health, physical health, psychological health, and they definitely don't injure us. The value of the relationship has to be weighed against what cutting that off, removing that thing that is inconvenient or uncomfortable or difficult. What will that do not for me, but what will that do to us? Your 4-year-old will stop asking you questions, but you don't have to make them stop while they're 4. In fact, if you were able to harshly enough get that little inquisitive mind not to approach you with those wonderments, he'll quit asking you questions when he's 4, and it'll be easier on you, but he'll never ask you questions when he's 14, 24, or 40. There'll come a time when you wish the 14-year-old would ask you a few questions. I wouldn't try to stop that now. It's just inconvenient and difficult and uncomfortable and annoying. Be careful what you're willing to ask someone else to do, to become, or do without for your comfort and your convenience. Religiously, things that make us uncomfortable aren't necessarily unscriptural. Things that scare us aren't necessarily unsafe. And things that we see as easy, hey, why can't you just... They might be hard, if not impossible, or at least daunting for other people. And the things that we see as safe may frighten other people or make them feel uncomfortable. When I make changes, when Jackie approaches me and says, hey, this would be better, this would be easier, when I do those things to accommodate her or a friend, or even as a compromise for my work in order to get along better with a client or a company, when I make those kinds of changes, I always view them as a concession, and I view them as a gift. I'm giving to you. I'm not giving in. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving out. It's a gift. And gifts don't have strings or expectations. They are often simple, and sometimes they can be costly, but I don't mind choosing to give. I don't like being forced. I don't like being demanded. I don't like being manipulated, and I don't like being controlled. But what I'm asking, what am I willing to ask of others to do just for my own comfort or my own convenience? I think we need to be very, very careful, only considering our comfort and not the other person's comfort. We know it's not going to hurt them to do that. It's not going to hurt them not to do that. This would be easier for me if they did that. Well, if if we really believe it wouldn't hurt them to do it, then it probably would not hurt us not to ask. The mission of Heritage Christian University is simple. They aim to advance the churches of Christ by equipping servants through undergraduate and graduate programs. Heritage Christian University produces effective communicators of the gospel, focusing on evangelism and a commitment to Scripture. Heritage Christian University is accredited by the Association for Biblical Higher Education and offers the following degrees: Associate of Arts in Biblical Studies, Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies, Master of Arts, Master of Ministry, and Master of Divinity. Since 1968, Heritage Christian University, formerly International Bible College, has offered affordable degrees in biblical studies, allowing graduates to thrive in their ministries without the burden of loan debt after graduation. For more information about Heritage Christian University, visit www.hcu.edu. That's 3 W's and a dot. hcu.edu. Heritage Christian University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Using the tool of shortwave radio, World Christian Broadcasting literally covers the world every day with the gospel. They use 2 large curtain antennas. One is located in Anchor Point, Alaska, and the other in Madagascar. They send out messages that are recorded at their international home in Franklin, Tennessee. They make available 40 hours of broadcast every day. The broadcasts are made in English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, English for Africa, and Arabic. They would love for your group to visit them. You can bring your ladies group, your youth group, or your men's group. Just give them a call at 615-371-8707, 615-371-8707, or you can go to 3 W's and a dot, worldchristian.org, find the Donate Here button, and make a financial contribution to support this work that literally covers the world every day with the gospel. World Christian Broadcasting, in cooperation with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure.